Hi everyone, so in this second part of my video I'm going to show you how you can start putting your pages together for your book. So most of you have probably already got your book and possibly even gutted it, taken out the pages. So you really do need to have an idea of what size you're doing. If you don't have a book already, that's okay. You've probably determined the size of your block and you can make your pages to that size, and then you'll have to find a book to match the size. If you can't find a book, you could actually always make a hardcover by cutting out cardboard if you want to, like cutting out the shape of quite thick cardboard and then covering it with paper, or you can even do a slow stitch piece to cover it. So just to give you an idea of what my plan will be, I want to have, I don't want to cover up all of the book, but I do want something interesting on the cover. So at the end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a strip about the height of that blue part of the spine. So a strip of slow stitch piece which I'll attach, and it will wrap around and you can tie up your book. But I'll show you that later, and it will just be another opportunity to do a slow stitch piece, and Rachel's going to do something a bit different with her book. So those decisions don't need to be made until the end. So what I'm going to do is show you how I am going to attach my pages and how I prepare my pages for my book. So I'll find a blank one of these. I've got a lot of these pre-ripped up. So these are my pages that I'm working with, and just to give you an idea of dimensions, and they're only ripped, so they're not necessarily perfect, but they are approximately 7 inches tall by 5 inches, or just over 5 inches wide. Now my book cover is just over 5 inches wide by almost, it's 7.5. Okay, so my pages are about the same width and just slightly smaller, which is fine because on my pages I'm adding bits and pieces to it, and you know, bits of lace that will hang out and stuff like that. So so these are my foundation pieces that I'm doing my slow stitching on, and then I've got my pages. Okay, so these are the pages that are made out of calico fabric, calico simple cotton, which is unbleached. Okay, so very cheap calico. I actually buy calico bits from the crafty op shop that I go to. Right, so just to give you an idea, again, just ripped. I didn't do any measuring, I just approximated. The height is about 7.25 inches, and the width in total is just over 10.5. So, I mean, you can even see there that's not cut straight. That's actually a bit crooked, doesn't matter. I'll end up sticking my pages on top and you won't see it. Okay, so that's one where I was showing you how I did my title page. And then I've got a little tiny narrow gap in the middle, which is perfect because I will need to stitch through that when I'm attaching my pages to put them into my book. Now, I'm not going to show you how to attach the pages until we've done our blocks. So that is what will come together at the end, the construction of the book. But you can prepare your pages, and today I'm going to show you how you can stitch them down. You've got lots of different options. Okay, so I'm going to start by showing you that I have already stitched down my title page. So with my title page, I did all the embroidery, and then I cut the embroidery out and I placed it down onto this background piece of fabric. It's old sheet. I think I showed you that in a video. Okay. Then what I did is I just pinned it all in place, and also the lace just running underneath there. And I did seed stitches on the embroidery part, and then I just did running stitches. So just bring it up, hopefully you can see. So that's actually attached quite solidly, my page, my block, to my base page. Okay, so lots of running stitches there, and then seed stitches everywhere. So there's literally hundreds of stitches holding this page down. It's really solid, it's not coming off. Same with my little tab, I just folded it over. Don't know if you can see, I've just done a little running stitch along there, and I also did stitches on the sides to keep my tab closed. So it's not stitched there, but that will end up getting sandwiched in the book. Okay, so when you fold it in half, again, there's a very small strip overlay. Now I can choose to leave that blank, or I could collage some fabric over it if I want to, and stitch some fabric. But it's not bad to leave it blank. You're not really going to see it very well once your book is fully in place. It's only a tiny little amount. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I'm going to construct my book, and you do have two options here. So the first thing is, I might have decided if I wanted to put one of my sampler pages on the back of this one, just on this single sheet here, I could have pinned this as well, and as I was doing all the stitching on the back, it would have been stitching on here. That would have looked a bit funny for me because I've got seed stitching here and then running stitching, so seed stitching all over this might have wrecked my embroidery, and the running stitch wouldn't have been too bad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a second page, second one, and that will end up going on top. So what I will be doing here is I will be stitching my samplers on, and I'm going to show you that in the video today. And then I will have two base pages, this one and that one, and then I will attach them together. So when I attach them together, I literally can just do a blanket stitch around the edge. I could do a running stitch. I could do French knots, whatever I want. Okay, so it's not going to be stitched all over it. I'd probably like to do stitching along there, down here, along here, and down here, just so the block's nicely in place on each side. And then that would mean on my other page, I'd need to have my first block. So this would be my first block, which I would put on here. So once that was stitched down, it's quite a few layers of fabric, but it makes it nice and thick and textural. Once that is all stitched down, that would be my first page. Okay, so my pages would end up being one in the book, and then I would make another double that would go in the book, and then another double, just as many as I need for all the blocks that I'm doing. Okay, so it is going to be quite thick. There's going to be lots of nice stitching on it, almost like a quilt. If you don't want your book so thick, like I said, I could get rid of my second page and I could just work on one piece of fabric. That would slightly reduce the thickness. Okay, slightly reduce it. But as I said, that's not going to work for me because I just want to be careful about how I'm stitching down my blocks. Okay, so what I did want to say is and we've mentioned this before, but just to reinforce the message, you do need a decent width of a spine. So the minimum we're saying is 1.5 inches, which I think is, so I'm only just over 1.5. So if we have a look, if I measure from this side, it might be easier for you to see. So just from there to there, I'm only just over 1.5. Now, if your spine is too narrow, you could actually remove this spine. You could cut it out and create a new spine with cardboard. That is something that Rachel has shown many times in junk journaling. When it comes to that time, we might link a video from her showing you how to do that. I'm not intending on taking out this spine. I actually want to keep this so I can see it because I want to remember what the book was. And I think mine will be thick enough. If my stitching, just pop this in to show you. Sorry, neaten it up again. If my stitching becomes really thick, which it's going to do, one sec. So fold this up again, stick it into my book. Okay, so it's going to look like that as it's sticking out the edges. I want all the little lacy bits coming out and the tabs and things like that. What will happen, my book will just keep expanding. And then my band that I'm going to do around the outside, I'm going to put something on it so I can actually tie it closed. It really doesn't matter if it expands too much. Okay, that's going to happen. Okay, before I show you how to stitch the page down, and you do have different options, you can stitch it whatever way you want. I just wanted you to note that when you do a slow stitch piece like this with so much stitching on it, you can see how much there'd be thousands probably of stitches in that. Your pages do shrink a little bit. It's actually really solid this now. I mean, I've got in some places I've got up to 4 or 5 layers of fabric where I've got my base fabric, the white, and then I've put other fabric, and then like this bunny's got about 3 layers on it. So it does get quite thick and quite solid, and it will shrink a little bit. So let's compare this to one of my original sort of base fabrics, and look at that. Look at the difference. You can see how much it's come down. We've got about, I think it's about quarter or just over 1/4 of an inch there. So then your block page, you might feel that it looks funny because I've got a little bit of page left at the top. Now what you could do, I'm just seeing if I've got a bit here. I would probably have some lace somewhere. I'll find it later. I have heaps of lace. It's just in another box. You could put a bit of lace. You could put a base fabric underneath there to cover it up if you want to. It's up to you. So on my stitch samplers, you can actually see that I'm a little bit short, and even this green fabric I've gone higher than the page. So what I'm probably going to do is I might do some collage of some fabric at the top there just to make it look good. Okay, so hopefully that gives you the idea. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to organize this, so I'm going to stitch them down to my book page. I'll be back with you in a minute. Alright, so I've got my sampler pages and my base page. I actually, at the bottom here, I'll just show you, move it up. I have actually torn off a bit of white. I had a white border like this at the bottom that was quite thick, and I wanted my stitching to come down just a little bit further so that I have some space to do something at the top. And the other one is just going to go straight down. Now, we've got this strip at the top. I'm going to stitch these pages down, and then what I'm thinking of doing is doing a bit of a collage of fabrics at the top and doing some slow stitching on them. And then I think I'm just going to put a title, stamp a title, stitch samplers. So you'll see that in a minute. All right, so I have pinned my samplers down onto my base page. And now all I'm going to do is some stitching. I'm just using an old white cotton, calls it a machine cotton. Okay, would have picked this up at the crafty op shop that I go to, and I'm just using a smaller needle. I don't know what kind it is. The eye's not too big. And I am going to just do some stitching to stitch my pages down. So you'll see what that's all about. Okay, I hope I stay on camera because I am very zoomed in on purpose so that you can see. I'm trying to get better at that and hopefully better at staying on camera. All right, so just gonna, not start on the top, start on the bottom. Actually, I might go this way. Just a thread there. So I'm going to bring it up close to the edge, and I want this to have a little bit of a sort of a look of a quilted fabric. I'm just tucking, there's a thread there, I just don't want it to pop out. Okay, so just simple running stitch. Okay, hopefully you can see that, just a running stitch. My plan on this one is just to do little running stitches in lines, just straight across in lines, probably around 1 centimetre apart, just to make sure it's held down well. Starting on the edge, because as you stitch the fabric can move even though I've pinned it, and this will just secure it in line with where I want it on the page, sort of lined up right at the bottom of the page behind the base page. Okay, and just to the end. Right, and then just finding gaps, so I'm going to go just above the seed stitch now, so that is about 1 centimetre apart, and then my next line will probably be above the pistol stitches and then above the knots. Then I might do them in between. I'll just see how I go. You're not going to have to watch all of this, that would be super boring. So what I'll do is I'll speed up a bit and then I'll cut the video towards the end when I've got the stitches in place. All right, so I've stitched down my 2 sampler pages, and for both of them all I've got is a running stitch that runs between the threads about every centimetre, but sometimes it's slightly bigger, like that's bigger because I could run it neatly there, but I couldn't run it through the middle because of my stitching, so I just ran it at the top and then in between. So you can see on the back, it kind of looks like a quilted effect now, which is what I was hoping to achieve. And then at the top here, I've now got this space. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to basically create a little title at the top of the page called Stitch Samplers. So I've pulled out some little scraps of fabric. I know I really like this one. I'd like this one to go across the top. So what I'm planning to do is running stitch that down again with the same cotton, just so it's not too visible. I didn't want it chunky. And then I pulled out a few things. I thought I might use a Suffolk puff, something like this. So I have these, which I made for junk journals. I did sewing machine stitch these, but that's okay because I'm going to stitch over it. So what I was thinking is putting this a little bit high so it will end up sticking out of the book. And with the Suffolk puff, I was thinking of placing it somewhere as well. Now I don't want to place in the middle actually, because I think that needs to come over a little bit, because it'll be too chunky in the fold. So I thought I'd stick it maybe on the end, and I don't mind it covering a bit of the stitching. Doesn't matter, it's only basic stitching. And then I've got quite a bit of this tape. I don't know what this tape's for. Someone can tell me. I buy it at the Crafty Op shop. And what I want to do is I want to stamp Stitch Sampler on this. So you can see I've done a couple of practices with my stamp. So what I've got, these letters from AliExpress. They were really cheap and I've got quite a few of them. And I've just made the word Stitch Sampler. And then using the Stays On ink, this one is a midnight blue. I've also got this in red, a dark green, black, and a dark brown as well. I'm just going to stamp the word. So I do it on the book just because I wouldn't want it going through or accidentally getting the ink on my fabric. Just eyeballing where it can go, and then all I do to clean my thing, I don't even really clean them properly. I just stamp on here to get rid of the ink. and then I'm going to do the sampler, leaving a little gap. Whoops, pressed a bit hard on there, doesn't matter. Okay, so the stays on I like because you pretty much can stamp on anything, and then I think you iron it and it kind of sets it. I'm going to cut the end off, and I actually want to fray the ends a little bit, so let's see if I can get that going. Yep, there we go. Frayed that end. And then I want to fray this end. Alright, so stitch sampler. My plan was then to stitch that around there, and then you won't actually see the machine stitching. That'll actually disappear, and the ruffle stays. Now I wanted to put something there. Now I have to say I got the most beautiful gift from someone, Rachel, not my sister. I've already thanked Rachel. So I was talking about these types of buttons, these linen covered buttons. I love them, the old ones. So I got some from Anne Brooke when we did our collaboration, and I've pretty much used them all. I think I had one left, and I was just talking about how I love them. And lovely Rachel from the UK, she sent me the biggest parcel of things. So most of the buttons in here have come from Rachel. So she asked me what type of buttons I like, and I told her I also love the shell, like the mother of pearl type buttons, and then these old linen buttons. She sent me so many. Look at all this. Most of this is from Rachel. A few are mine, like that's mine, but most of this thing is from Rachel. And then I also got some big ones in little metal dishes that she sent me. I've got quite a few big ones. So these are going to be fantastic, and things that I definitely want to put in my journal. And she also sent me some really cool little threads. Lots of them. I won't go through everything. She sent me quite a few different threads and some fabric and just gorgeous things. So I've already thanked Rachel, but thank you again. It's just amazing, and I'll be definitely putting bits and pieces into my slow stitch book. So what I want to do is I'm thinking I'd like to maybe put a button in the middle of the Suffolk puff. So I've just got to work out what size. So I like that, and then I'd have like a coloured thread there. See what a big one would look like. I could go one of the pearl ones. That's pretty. Oh, I like that colour. That's a beautiful colour. And I like that as well. Ooh, I think I'm tossing up between those two at the moment. That's a pretty colour too. No, I like that one better. It's going to take me a long time to run out of these beautiful buttons. Smaller one. Oh, that's pretty. It's hard to decide. I like all of them. Oh, that's nice. Kind of got a bit of an orangey tinge to it. Oh, what to put there? I tried that one already. I like that too. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stitch all the things down, and then I'll decide which one I want to put there. Okay, so starting off with this base piece of fabric, I'm just going to use same thing, just the old cotton, and I will do the simple running stitch. So I've got a little bit of cotton left. I'll start with this. So it's Wednesday for us in Australia. I filmed most of my video, and I'll be just putting it together to put up for you. My time, it goes up about midnight. I'll just have to check with Rach if that time suits her. And Rachel's is coming out just before mine, like about half an hour before I think she normally posts it. when we're actually coordinated properly and I'm on time, which I'm usually not on time. And then our video for next week, that's the start of February, we're going on to our second theme. And for the second theme, I'm going to draw the different prompts, so the background prompt and then the feature element. So for February, my videos will come first and then Rachel's will be second. So we're going to do that each month. We're just going to alternate who goes first. It's obviously a joint project that we're both working on together, so we're kind of just taking it in turns. If you get confused, don't worry. Rachel's putting everything in order in the playlist. If you're on the Facebook group, I've added the playlist to the top of our page. Hopefully it stays there. I'm new with Facebook groups, so I'm hoping that I've worked that out properly. And you can just go to that link if you are in the Facebook group. So I'm pretty amazed at how many people are now in the Facebook group. We're well over 1,000 now. We were kind of expecting, maybe we would have been really happy with 200. So it's pretty unbelievable how many people are doing this. And we've really enjoyed seeing how different everyone is interpreting the prompts. And that's the whole thing, getting inspiration from other people and sharing. So feel free to steal our ideas. It's not stealing. We got ideas from other people. It's just sharing the inspiration. I would never class it as stealing unless you copied my thing exactly and then you were selling it for commercial purposes. Then that might be a different story. But we're obviously doing this and giving you ideas because, you know, we want you to take what you want, do the ideas that you like, that appeal to you. You don't have to do what we do. It might just give you a thought in your head of something unique you want to try. And that's what we're seeing a lot on Instagram and in the Facebook group. Really different ideas, which is brilliant. And so far, everyone has been so kind and positive and encouraging. And so many of our newbies, you're just doing wonderful work. Like, I think, you know, a lot of you felt very intimidated and you've done stuff that looks fantastic and you probably didn't think you were capable of it. This slow stitching isn't too hard once you learn the basics. And as someone said to me this morning, she's realised that the possibilities are absolutely endless. The prompts are just great because they get you to start thinking. You start getting ideas in your head when you've got the prompts. All right, that was a bit of a ramble. You can tell that I'm related to my sister, Rachie, the chatty one. So now I'll probably speed you up while I finish stitching this down and then I'll get on to the other little elements. So what this little piece of Liberty is that I'm stitching down at the moment, a bit thick there, getting through. I think it was Sue from Paper Inspirations. Hi Sue, I'm pretty sure you watch. that I got this idea from, where you just basically get a strip of fabric. So mine was about 1 inch wide, and you just kind of, as you feed it through the sewing machine, you kind of tuck the pleats in and it stitches down the pleats, and then you can use it as an embellishment in junk journals. But why not use them as embellishments in slow stitching? Plus, I'm going to show you on my rabbit page, because my rabbit page has ended up a bit smaller than my base page, my double base page, like the thick one, the wide one. I'm going to try and do the same thing pleating, but messily pleating with this sari silk. So I've got some different colours of sari silk, but I think that sort of pinky peachy one will go quite nicely with my bunny block. So I'll show you how you can just do that by hand, just by making the pleats and doing little stitches to hold it in place. So again, just a simple running stitch just to hold this pleated Liberty fabric in place. Then I will stitch on the Suffolk puff. Now I've got a lot of vintage Suffolk puffs. I buy them from Melanie from Melbourne, who I've mentioned. Her Instagram name is Purveyor of Reclaimed Textiles, with I think it's an underscore in between each word. And great if you're in Australia, because she has lots of different pieces, and I will collect up pieces for about a month, and then I'll pay her and she'll ship them up to me. So I've got a lot from Melanie, and they come in like all connected, like in little blocks, and you have to take them apart. So you can see on this one, there's little wear and tear and little stitches, and there's still some threads. There's a bit of thread there where it hasn't been taken apart, where it has been taken apart, but the thread's still there. So I take them apart, and I love them. I like buying the old ones. She has some that look newer, but I like the old ones. Like, you can see how faded that one is on the front. And I've also got them from Lou with Blue on Instagram, who I've shown you when I opened up the big roll of fabrics that Rachel gave me for Christmas. So this one might have come from her, it might have come from Melanie, and I'm pretty sure that fabric came from Lou with Blue, and also I know that this sari trim was tied around a bundle of fabrics I bought a while ago from her. So we are sourcing things from all over the place, from op shops, from normal retail stores, from online retail stores, from Etsy sellers as well. So there's lots of places that you can get bits and pieces. All right, I'm going to sew that down. Little overcast stitch on the edge. So coming up through the back, and then just straight down and angle my needle so I do a stitch a little bit further along. Just little stitches. Now I think I've got my Suffolk puff here running off the page, only just. So the Suffolk puff is fully stitched in place, and now I'm going to stitch down my little label. So I decided to use a Pale Aqua stranded cotton, all 6 strands, just to perform a simple running stitch around the outside of the label. Now my label is stitched down, and I am going to decide on which button I want to use. So I actually like all 3, but I decide to go with one of the linen buttons. It already had some thread in there which I need to remove so I can put my own in, because I want to do a colour. And I decide to do use a chunky perle cotton and I use two strands and I double it over so it's like 4 threads in total. Now normally you would do a knot and come up from the back side, but I'm going to come from the front side and you'll see why in a minute. So making sure my stitches are going down through that center. I'm going to leave a tail, come back up through the center and through the other buttonhole, down through the original buttonhole, back up through the second buttonhole. So I've done 2 stitches to make sure it's secure. And then what I decide to do is I tie a knot with the threads. It's quite a chunky knot because this is quite a thick perlé cotton. So just tie it twice and I cut it off. That's a bit long, so I trim it off again. I think it's just cute with the threads hanging out like that. So now what I need to do is I need to stitch my bunny block in place. So again, using that thin silk cotton, I'm just simply doing little stitches and I go all over the place. So I go around the outside like a running stitch, and then I actually do stitches all over the place to make sure it's held down well. So my bunny block is now stitched down to the page, and as you can see I've got that, so there's all the stitches on the back, but as you can see I've got that strip of calico at the top and I want to cover that up because it doesn't look good. So I have a piece of Sari silk that has been dyed. It's a sort of a pinky peachy colour, and I'm going to stitch that across the top to make kind of like a frill. I'm also checking out some of my smaller laces to see if I want to layer it up with the Sari silk, and I decide to go with that cream one. So my technique for stitching down the Sari silk is just that I'm going to do little running stitches and then pleating it every now and then, just doing it messily. I don't want it to be perfect and uniform. So I'm just doing a few little stitches at the beginning to keep it in place, and then I'll do a little pleat, just a messy one, and then I will stitch it down. So it's a little bit awkward to start with, but then I get it going. Then I stitch it down. So they're just little tiny running stitches. So with my Sari silk now in place across the top, I decide to add that piece of lace, and again just simply stitching it down using little tiny stitches across the bottom, like little running stitches. So my Sari silk and lace are now stitched in place, and they've covered up that little strip of calico, which I think looks better. Now that all my blocks are stitched onto a foundation piece, it's time to line them up together. So just playing around with them, trying to get them lined up. I'm going to pin them in place, and then I'm going to show you how I stitch them. Now my blocks are pinned in place. I'm going to start off by using this variegated thread. It's quite a thin one. It's not a stranded cotton. It's kind of like a very thin perlé cotton. And I'm going to do 2 lines of running stitch down the middle. Just finishing off that second line of running stitch down the bottom, down to the bottom. Running stitch is now complete, and I've switched back to my thin silk thread. I want these stitches not to stand out. I want them to be fairly invisible. They're not completely invisible, but they're fairly invisible. You can't really see them. So all I'm doing is a running stitch around the outside of the whole piece to hold the whole thing down in place. So when you're doing the stitches, you'll be focusing on one side, but keep flipping it over and checking the back just to make sure you like the look of it. So I completed that running stitch the whole way around the edge, and now I thought I'd show you what it looks like as it would be in my book. So this is what it would look like on the top, bottom and side, and these are my blocks fully sewn in. So the running stitch has gone all the way around that edge there. It's actually nice and thick. It's got a lot of good texture to it. You can't even see the stitches on this side. That thread is pretty much invisible. And you can just see it around the outside of the samplers. But I'm really pleased with how my first page has come together. And I'm looking forward to next week, where we will have our new theme. So my video will be first up next week, and Rachel's video will come second. In fact, for the whole of February, my videos will be coming out first and Rachel's will be coming out second. So I hope everyone is enjoying this project so far. I know a lot of people are quite keen to get onto a new block, so that will be next week. So thanks for watching again, and I will see you next week. Bye.